Hey guys, welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making a Mexican feast, and this is one of my husband's favorite dinners. It includes cornbread, Mexican rice, and burritos. I've already preheated my oven to 350, so let's get started. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to get started with is the cornbread because it'll take the longest to bake. That starts out with 1.5 cups of flour. After the flour, I have 3/4 of a cup of sugar. Now I'm also going to add 1/2 cup of cornmeal to our dry ingredients. And lastly, for the dry ingredients, I have 1 tablespoon of baking powder, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, and a pinch of cayenne pepper. And then we're just going to mix this all together. I hesitate to even call this just regular cornbread because I've tried a lot of different cornbread recipes and I always was disappointed with how dry they were. But once I tried this recipe, or I should say tweaked this recipe to my liking, it really almost creates more of a custardy cornbread, and I haven't found anything that I like more. Okay, so that looks great. Let's start on our wet ingredients. So first, you're gonna need a can of creamed corn, not just your regular corn, but creamed corn. And then add 5 tablespoons of butter melted, as well as 2 room temperature eggs. I'm also going to add 1/3 cup of oil. And lastly, 1 1/4 cups of regular 2% milk. All right, and just mix all that together. Now add your wet to your dry and mix it together well. Once your cornbread is mixed up, add it to a buttered 8x8 baking pan. This should take about 35 minutes or until it's set in the middle and golden brown on the edges. Now that I've got my cornbread in the oven, I'm going to start on the burritos. So in order to do that, you're going to take a pound of 80/20 ground beef and cook it over medium heat and crumble it up until it's completely cooked through. Once your meat is done cooking, if you want to drain out the fat, now is the time to do so. At this point, I'm going to add 1/2 teaspoon of salt, 1/4 teaspoon of pepper, and 3/4 teaspoon of taco seasoning. Alright, I've just added a can of refried beans. You can also use homemade for this recipe. At this point, you also want to taste test your mixture just to be sure that there's enough salt and pepper and taco seasoning for your liking. Let's get to assembling our burritos. The amount of mixture that we made should make a good 6 burritos, and I like to use fajita size instead of burrito size, just because I feel like there's too much tortilla with the burrito size. In order to make assembly a little easier, I like to zap the tortillas in the microwave for about 15 seconds. Okay, let's get to rolling. You don't want to overfill the burritos because you're going to have a really hard time actually closing them. I understand that this recipe probably isn't the most authentic, but it does taste really good. This recipe is actually a twist off of my mother-in-law's recipe, and she's known for making these for women that are almost at their due date or even past their due date. And she has a pretty good record because within hours or a couple days of the pregnant woman eating these burritos, she usually goes into labor. I have a feeling it's a coincidence, but it's still kind of a funny joke that goes on within our family. So our burritos are almost done, and this is the part that really makes them unique. So I'm gonna take 2 8-ounce cans of tomato sauce and add to that 1 can of enchilada sauce. I like to use mild for that usually, but you could use hot if you like it a little spicier. Now I'm gonna take this sauce and just pour it all over the burritos. And our final ingredient is shredded cheddar cheese. You can do 1 to 2 cups of this. These are now ready for the oven, and they'll bake at about 350 degrees for 20 minutes. Last but not least, to finish our feast, we have Mexican rice. So I have 2 tablespoons of regular old, either canola or vegetable oil over medium-high heat. Into that, I'm gonna add 1 cup of white rice. And you're just gonna cook this for a little bit. You want the grains almost to get like a light brown to a deeper brown color, and it's gonna add more flavor to your Mexican rice. All right, so it's a little bit hard to see on camera, but I do have some browning going on here with my rice. At this point, I'm gonna add 1/2 teaspoon of salt and 1/2 teaspoon of cumin. Next is 1/2 cup of tomato sauce. Okay, now I'm gonna add 14 ounces of chicken stock. And last, 3 tablespoons of fresh chopped cilantro. Now crank your heat to low and put the top on. So it's taste testing time, and because this is my husband's favorite meal, I figured I'd have him taste test with us. This is Wyland, this is everybody. Let's try it. So I'm trying the cornbread and he's going for the burrito. I'm not surprised.
Really, really good, as always.
And then the Mexican rice. I like to add some salsa and sour cream to the plate, just because it's pretty good with the burrito, just as an add-on.